Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is really heartening that President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso has been getting a lot of international attention for doing the right thing. This is something that we in Africa should be very proud of, particularly when we have been a continent that has been grabbing the headlines for doing the wrong things, for the corruption, the gross mismanagement, the vote rigging, the violence, the brutality against our own people, and in some cases instigated by outsiders. Ben, welcome to the program.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, I must agree, this is a man that has decided, to put his country first and, the citizens of his country first. And that is, an example to other leaders, African leaders out there that, being in position of power does not mean that you should be now looking at self-interest and that of your immediate family and friends. You are tasked to, you know, look out for each and every citizen out there of your country, rich, poor, short, tall, no matter what, they should be the priority. Every decision must be based on their good will and betterment of each and every one of them. So on that regard, I should say well done to you, sir, and keep up the good work.
Well, here is one story that involves the Pope, and another one that involves President Trump.
You hear what just happened. A young African president just stood in front of the world, looked Donald Trump dead in the eye, and said words that no one had the courage to say before. This wasn't just a speech. This was a moment that shook global politics to its core. Ibrahim Traore didn't ask for respect. He demanded it. And in doing so, he may have just started a revolution. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear will make history. Did he really just say that to Trump? The words echoed across social media, newsrooms, and living rooms around the world. It wasn't just a headline, it was history in the making. Something unforgettable had just taken place at the prestigious Global Leadership Summit in Geneva, where the most powerful leaders of the modern world had come together under one roof to discuss global peace, economic development, and the future of humanity. In a room glowing with polished marble, crystal chandeliers, and guarded by elite security, presidents, prime ministers, billionaires, and monarchs sat shoulder to shoulder. The world watched, expecting formal speeches and political small talk, but no one could have predicted what was about to unfold. From the corner of the Grand Hall, Ibrahim Traore, the young and fearless president of Burkina Faso, sat quietly, his eyes sharp, focused, unblinking. Dressed in his military uniform with the flag of his nation proudly on his chest, he was surrounded by global giants, leaders of nations with nuclear weapons, vast economies, and deep histories of dominance. And across from him sat Donald J. Trump, the controversial and ever bold former president of the United States. Trump, never one to hold back his opinions, had just taken the stage. His speech was fiery, confident, and as always, full of provocative remarks. But it was one sentence that changed everything. He looked around the room, smiled slightly, and said, "You know, when you look at Africa, you just see chaos and corruption. You don't know who's running what, and honestly, it's a mess. Total disaster. Some laughed awkwardly. Others exchanged glances, unsure whether to react. A few nodded in agreement, perhaps out of habit or fear. But not Traore. He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. He didn't check to see who was watching. He simply stood up, not rushed, not angry, just calm, determined, and grounded. He took a few steps forward, each one louder than the last in the silence of the hall, and then, standing in the center of the stage with the eyes of the world upon him, he spoke. "With all due respect, Mr. Trump, you have no idea what Africa truly is. You could hear a pin drop. Heads turned, cameras zoomed in, some gasped, others reached for their phones. Security looked alert, sensing the tension. No one had expected this. A leader from one of the world's poorest nations was now speaking directly to one of the world's most powerful men. Traore's voice was steady and clear. He didn't yell. He didn't.
Sorry about that. We seem to have hit a technical problem there. I remember the speech where Trump did say that Africa was chaotic and run by corrupt and incompetent leaders, etc., etc. I think that speech did cause a lot of, let's just say, disquiet in Africa. As much as there was truth in it, one could not deny that one of the problems that we've had with the West, particularly the former colonial powers, is that they never actually admitted their role in making Africa poor. And in this video, Traore was basically pointing that fact out, that Africa is poor and corrupt, but the West must take responsibility for some of the things that have happened in Africa. And I think that is a point that really should have been said. And I think Traore, in this particular instance, he has credibility because he is one of the few African leaders who, ever since getting into power, there hasn't been any story of how corrupt he has become himself. Other African leaders, it is very common when the first thing they do when they get into power is order a motorcade for themselves, the most expensive cars, in a country where most hospitals don't even have an ambulance. This, I think, has given him credibility. And I salute him for that. And I think that has given his voice a lot of authority. And I salute him for that too. Ben.
I agree. The former colonizers had, you know, they did some atrocities in Africa, that, they are truly answerable till today. But you know what? I am not a fan of us finding, you know, a perfect excuse for what we see Africa today. When the colonizers left, they left infrastructure, development, you know, they left a roadmap. We didn't have to start from scratch. And most countries in Africa are 50 and above in terms of independence. Are they any better from what they were under colonial rule? The answer is no. Can we still blame the colonizers for what Africa is today? The answer is no. We have put ourselves in this mess. What Donald Trump, as much as, you know, he doesn't choose or he doesn't read the room, he was right. Africa is a mess. We live on handouts, and yet we are the richest continent. True or false? It's true. It is a mess. So I do not believe in blaming the West for what we are seeing today. I think we have had the opportunity to dust ourselves from the dirt, forge something together as a nation or as a continent, and we have failed. Now we are seeing Africa as, I mean, it's the most corrupt continent. There are movies being made and, funny clips being made out of Africa. We have failed ourselves, and we should stop now blaming others for, whatever mistakes that we have made. Yes, they made the mistakes. Yes, they're answerable. So as we, so as those that have been in power for since our independence, each and every country's independence, because we have failed.
President of the sovereign nation of Burkina Faso, son of the African soil, defender of his people. May grace and peace be multiplied to you through wisdom, courage, and truth. I received your letter not as a political communique, nor as a demand echoing through diplomatic channels. I received it as the cry of the soul, powerful, principled, and painful, from a son of the continent that has known too much loss, too much silence, and too many broken promises. I have read your words, not once, but many times, and each reading pierced deeper than the last. For in your voice, I heard not merely the anger of a president, but the righteous cry of a continent, long wounded by the dual blades of neglect and exploitation. Let me begin now with defense, but with confession. Yes, the church has, at moments in history, stood beside colonizers when it should have stood beside the crucified. Yet there were chapters, some long, some shamefully brief, where the mission of salvation became entangled in the machinery of subjugation, where the banner of the cross was hoisted beside flags of empire, and the teachings of Christ were diluted by the ambitions of kings. For these sins, sins of omission and commission, I bow my head in repentance. No institution, however sacred, is above self-examination. And if the church is to remain a beacon, it must not only shine outward, it must shine it within. You asked, will this papacy be different? And to that I reply, not only will it be different, it must be. For too long, the African voice has been heard only in whispers. Your leaders have been praised only when they were pliable and demonized when they dared to defy unjust systems. Your resources have been extracted while your people were left to scavenge what was theirs to begin with. But
that was the new Pope speaking, reportedly responding to an earlier video that was widely circulated on social media, where President Ibrahim Traore pointed to the injustices of the past and the indifference of the church. I think he has spoken with authority because he has not followed the same path that most of Africa's leaders have followed. The minute they get into power, they've thought of enriching themselves. I think the one shortcoming that I would say, and I hope that you take very seriously, is that he has got to create a political system that will allow Burkina Faso to have political stability and accountability, because that has been one of the problems with Africa. As long as he's doing the right thing, being the powerful man, the big leader, is all very well. But if somebody who should come after him should become corrupt, that becomes the biggest problem, because that individual is not accountable to anyone. Just as Ibrahim Traore is not accountable, democratically accountable to the people of Burkina Faso right now. We can still have quality leaders with a vision and yet still have a stable political system. As a president, notably Paul Kagame of Rwanda, has achieved a lot of things in that country. But the fact still remains that Rwanda is not politically stable. Because if he should, God forbid, drop dead right now, the people of Rwanda would not know who is going to take power. And if somebody should take power and he becomes a tyrant, he would want the same powers that Paul Kagame has enjoyed all these years. And all the achievements that Rwanda has accomplished could be reversed in a matter of a few years if you do not have a stable political system. That is the danger that I would say President Ibrahim Traore should be aware of and should seek actively to address. Come up with a constitution, strong democratic institutions, the police, the law, the judiciary, the army, so that everything is above board. And power should never be exercised by one individual, because as we have seen in Africa again and again, absolute power can corrupt absolutely. Ben?
A good example is Zimbabwe, where we see that the political system is a mess. And within that mess, it is very easy to undo all the good that has been done. I mean, when we got independence, we inherited, functional systems, water, the basic water, housing, transport. The infrastructure was there. All we needed was to build on it, to build on the good. But because we did not have that, political structure that was, for the people, by the people, everything was wiped away. And it's a mess. That is a classic example of a mess. Zimbabwe. We need to find a system, a democratic system where the people choose their own leaders and those leaders become accountable to the people. We are the bosses of those leaders, and they should walk us through the processes and how they want to make, decisions. But without that, like you said, you really don't know what tomorrow holds. And that alone creates uncertainty and chaos. And this is what Africa, is all about. But there are countries that have tried. We should give recognition. There are countries that are doing good, the likes of Botswana, just to mention, a few. They have done marvelously well, even after, the whole circus of, colonization and all that. They've done very well. So, in closing, I would want to say I really hope, Africa does put its house in order. We inherited a very, very, very beautiful continent, one that is galore with mineral wealth, one that is galore with human wealth. Mention anything, Africa has got it. But our leadership has suppressed and made it very difficult for the continent to blossom, to shine. I really hope we can change that in going forward. And then we can be independent and self-sustaining, and look after our own people. We don't have to wait for handouts. Because once you're waiting for handouts, you become a slave to those that are giving. You really don't have a voice. This is why you find, President Traore has got a voice because he has done beautiful for his people. He's not corrupt. So he can speak about corruption. If you are corrupt, you cannot speak because everybody knows you're a hypocrite. You are doing exactly the same. So I hope we do learn from that. Thank you.
My final message to President Ibrahim Traore is I think you have become a beacon of hope in Africa. We have been a continent that has been plagued by tyrants, corrupt, incompetent, utterly useless, making the same mistake over and over again. The problems of colonialism, slave trade have only made our situation worse. And it is easy to divide a nation that is already divided. But I think your leadership, ever since you got into power, has shown that Africa can rise above the present burden of failure and incompetence and chaos. I think what we need is not to have a few generation of one leader who comes out and shines like a bright star, only to fade away, to go away when he goes. We need to create now a political system that allows more leaders like yourself to emerge and to leave behind them a legacy of a stable and economically prosperous nation at peace with itself. The potential to become wealth for Africa is undeniable. We have the resources. Countries like Zimbabwe, many people said if we had had good government in 1980, would be the South Korea of Africa. We have been plagued by bad governance for the last 45 years. And your quality leadership has shown some light that we can overcome our problems. So for that, I salute you. And I sincerely hope that Burkina Faso will not just see one leader who has come to shine only to revert back to the chaos of the past. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.